solution to problems. But, of course, there are challenges also in working with immigrant and refugee families. I mentioned it earlier that there is this stigma against mental illness. And in a lot of cultures, there's really not a way of describing mental health. On the other hand, there is also this concept of mental health that's very different than our culture. It may be more integrated, holistic. It may involve spirituality. It may involve the ancestors. It's just a very different way of viewing what makes a child, what makes an adult mentally healthy. They show respect for the school by keeping their distance. Here's where that conflict comes in. Here's why we somehow think they're not respecting schools, because traditionally we think if you respect the school and education, you get involved. But the fascinating part of this is that for these parents, that's the way they're showing the respect. As I mentioned, I've taught a class for immigrant parent leaders for several years, and I asked them, so what was the education like in your home country? Were your parents involved in the school? And I have yet to find a country outside the United States where parents were not only welcomed, but they were expected to participate, to be involved. These parents consistently tell me that in their home countries, their parent showed respect by keeping a distance. And so that is what they bring to this country. And when I will say to them, I want you to understand that if you don't come to a back-to-school night in the beginning of the year, from that point forward, the teacher thinks you don't care. Let me just tell you, these parents are stunned. They cannot believe it because it is the antithesis of what they're thinking. They think they're showing the teachers that they are leaving it in their respected hands. They also face cultural and language barriers, and I want to emphasize the cultural barriers here because, again, part of what we say in this society is, oh, if they just learn English, they'll fit in. Everything will be fine. And truthfully, there are many immigrants and many refugee parents who do speak English. Some of them come from English-speaking countries, in Africa, for example. But there's still so many cultural barriers. There's still so many things that are different in terms of what we expect and what the norm is here. And we don't talk about those. They're just these unspoken rules that they don't quite get. Another challenge is that the family, again, is totally adjusting to a new environment, not just the student, but the entire family. At this point, we're going to go into the strategies, and I know so many of you really wanted to hear these strategies for connecting with the immigrant and refugee parents. But the background is critically important because there aren't any strategies that are magic bullets. If you do this, everything will flow from it. As you develop strategies that are related to your own community, that are sensitive to the groups within your community, you need to be thinking about the background that went into this. So you're not just looking at some behavior that's obvious, but you're looking at what else is going on in the family. The overarching thing that you're trying to achieve here is to build personal relationships. Everything else flows from there. And again, we tend not to think that that's a role of school, that maybe the parents can come in and we'll talk to them, but we're not thinking about building a relationship that may go on from teacher to teacher. To build that relationship, the family needs to truly believe you are there for them. And that means you might need to help them with issues outside of school, such as housing, employment, their physical health. If the family is grappling with these, then their ability to work with the student in school is going to truly be limited. So it may not be that a teacher is doing this, but maybe a guidance counselor, maybe a parent liaison, maybe a social worker in the school or a social worker in the community. But recognize that if you don't deal with these basic issues, it's going to be that much harder to connect with the family. And when you do deal with these issues, you begin to develop this very important relationship of trust that benefits the student and the family and the school and the community in so many ways. Now let's look at the traditional way schools have family involvement. How do they go about involving parents and other family members in the school. Well, what I like to say is, to quote Dr. Phil, how's this working for you? Basically, these traditional family strategies aren't working. Otherwise, the teachers and the administrators wouldn't be wringing their hands over the disconnect with families from the other cultures. So we need to look at what's really going on right now. These strategies, these outreach strategies, were developed for parents who were comfortable with the system, who have this what's called social capital. They know how the system works. They're comfortable being at school. Their parents probably went to school. They feel they have a right to be heard. And I'm sure you all see these parents in the school all the time. And they should be there because they are the backbone of school volunteers. But understand they're there because they've had positive experiences with school themselves. And this is a place that they feel comfortable. On the other hand, typically immigrant and refugee families, again, we keep coming back to this, they don't see it as their role to get involved. But one thing that the research very clearly shows is that they are working with their children at home. They may be just asking, have you done your homework? They may make sure there's a place for the student to do some quiet work, encourage them to read. So we do see that, but part of the challenge here is to move beyond that, is to help these families understand what it takes to do the homework, to connect with them, to navigate the system. Here's how you go about creating this welcoming school so that the immigrant and refugee families are drawn to it and don't feel this intimidation factor. And it begins right off the bat with what they see. There need to be signs in multiple languages, and the signs need to be in the languages that are in your community. So when they walk in the door, they immediately feel that they are a part of something. We need to have a front office staff that's welcoming and supportive, and I'm sure that there's a lot of your bells are going off in heads right now when you think about who's at the front office right now. I don't know why we've evolved this way, but for some reason that's a very intimidating place. Usually has a really high counter. Sometimes the person who's working in there isn't the most welcoming or friendliest, and it can be very intimidating. And what we need to do is move from that to a place where the person there feels their job, first and foremost, is to welcome families when they walk in the door, to have some resources around of someone who can speak the language. It might be a parent volunteer. It might be someone who's a part of the school system. It might be a teacher. But to make sure that there is some way to help these families. I've heard of schools where they have a DVD that shows how the school operates, and they have the narrative done in a variety of languages. So at the very least, the family can see what's going on in the school in their language. Administrators who personally reach out, and this is a very critical piece of it, that in the schools from the Caring Across Communities where there's been a very successful program, I hear over and over that there are administrators there who view it as their job to reach out. They welcome these families. They are present for them. They connect with them. And it needs to come from the top. You need to have an administrator who believes that this is part of the job. Then let's look at the issue of teachers. Teachers need to make personal contact with each family, and it may seem like a huge issue, particularly at